Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another awesome episode. Am I going to call it quarantine stream? Am I going to call it the no code fireside chat? I don't know. No code chronicles, no idea. But today I have a really awesome guest again. I have the pleasure of having Chris Spags, who's the founder and CEO of Jetboost.io. He's going to tell us a lot about it, but he's already built himself a very nice resume in the no code space. And his tool is really, really useful, specifically when used with Webflow, which is primarily what he does. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to sharing your experience with everyone on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Christian. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. So we're going to keep this very casual. Why don't you just kind of hop into kind of telling us a little bit more about what Jetboost is, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So Jetboost is a suite of no-code plugins that you can install onto your Webflow site that allows you to do things that you can't easily natively do in the Webflow platform today. So things like being able to search content on your page or filter content on your page. Those are the two main ones right now. And then we've got a whole slew of new plugins coming out soon, allowing you to have your visitors like content, favorite content, being able to do things like rotate, featured items on your page. So you always have fresh content available, all sorts of different abilities that Webflow out of the box doesn't provide, but people are asking for over and over. That's what Jetboost helps with. And I think one of the big differentiators between Jetboost and some other products that are built on top of Webflow is with Jetboost, it's a 100% no-code tool. You don't have to write any JavaScript code. You don't have to edit any code. You just walk through our step-by-step visual workflow, and within a few minutes, you'll have these really powerful features up and running on your Webflow site.
That's amazing. And I think that that's like such a powerful thing. And I know that you're working very closely as well with the guys at Webflow. You guys are friends, so that's awesome. There's not this sense of like, he's replacing our features. It's like he's accelerating the ability for other people to build really cool additional features on top of their stack. So I salute you for that. I know that we at We're No Code have really enjoyed you guys' suite of different features. And yeah, we're definitely considering, whether or not we're going to be able to kind of implement some of those as part of our main course. But, me and you just started this conversation a couple minutes ago, and we'll take it offline in a sec. Very cool. So tell us about the sort of process of, I guess, first of all, getting into no code and then building Jetboost.io, because like a lot of people in the maker space, you build a lot of different things and then you see kind of what sticks. And it seems like you really found a great fit with Jetboost. But take us through that process from like maybe discovering, and I'm guessing that it was like Webflow, like what's your background? How do you get into it? And then what led you into Jetboost?
Yeah. So my background is 100% software development. I've been doing development for, like 15 years now. And I really, up until a year ago, wasn't even aware of the no-code space, or maybe I'd heard of it. And, like a lot of developers tend to do, you hear no-code and you think, well, that doesn't sound like something I'd be interested in. But what really was like the light bulb moment for me was I had a friend of mine, Corey Haynes, who's the head of growth at Baremetrics. He has tried to learn code before. It just wasn't for him. He's at his core, he's a marketer. Like that's what he likes to do. He doesn't want to have to write code. And I was working on some of my own products at the time and wasn't really going anywhere. And within a weekend, he had built this job board that he built it in Webflow with Zapier, with Typeform. He put all these no-code tools together, built this fully functioning job board, and he showed it to me. And I was like, wow, this is a real product. This looks amazing. It functions. He had companies already submitting jobs, and he was, earning revenue from it. And that for me was the moment where I was like, okay, I need to see what's going on here. I need to, understand this, because here's someone who doesn't code, doesn't want to code, and he just launched a product in lightning quick speed. So
love it.
Yeah. From
Yeah,
there,
we brought him on, and he talked a little bit
oh,
about.
no way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had him on. So we're going to be releasing some shorter clips. We're working right now on like editing some of these chapters, so you all also get a nicely edited version of this afterwards with like sort of the highlights. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really where this thing shines, right? It's like the ability to just bring products to market, and for developers, like I love that story because one of the big things that I'm sure you've heard of by now is that basically developers, they're like, no code? Well, I know how to code. Why would I learn no code? And it's like, it's about getting to your end quicker, right? So, and it's about focusing on the tasks that are maybe more complex. So if you're building out complicated algorithms and things like that, like, yeah, it's going to be good to custom code them, but why would you custom code kind of like a login with Facebook, right? It just doesn't really make sense. And that's where I think sort of no code shines. So you basically discovered Webflow and then took that journey. Where did it lead you first? Like, what was the first like random little thing that you built, and what was that feeling like?
Yeah, well, it's funny. The first thing that I built was, as a developer, I'm looking at his site and I'm thinking, man, this is really cool. But you weren't able to search for a specific job very easily. And the first thing I'm thinking is like, well, maybe I can build a search for him, because Webflow at the time, they had like a site-wide search, but there was no way to like quickly, as you're typing in, filter down a list. Like he had a list of jobs right on the page.
Yeah.
If I want to search for a director of marketing or head of growth or something, there wasn't an easy way to do that. And so I wrote this little JavaScript just a little bit of code that he put on his page, and it worked, and I didn't really think anything of it. And over the next probably 6 months, he kept referring people to me who wanted the same thing on their Webflow site, whether it was a job board or a resource directory or some other type of site that they built in Webflow. They wanted to really quickly and easily be able to have people search their content. And so I did a few of them by hand, and it was kind of tedious. Like I had to look at each individual person's site and make changes to the code in order for it to work. And after a handful of these, I thought, well, maybe there's a way I can do this that anyone can install it on their site and not have to mess with the code at all, and be able to do this visually. Like that's the whole reason they use Webflow. So really, that's what.
Yeah, like maybe I'm on something here.
Yeah,
the 10th person who's needing something from me who doesn't know how to code. It's relatively simple, and that's when I guess like Jetboost sort of came to be, right? You were just like, and that's so interesting because I think that's the way so many great companies are built. I'm not saying it's the only way that they can be, but it's basically like you just see things like a repetitive need, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe I can figure something out to scale the way that I deliver this this to people, right? That is so cool. So tell us a little bit now about sort of what you're looking to do with Jetboost moving forward. Is this something that you're going to continue to? Are you going to integrate fully one day into? I'm sure there's lots. You're going to be bought out by Webflow. And just for reference, for everyone watching, no-code tools are built fully with code. So this is, like these are solutions that allow people who don't know how to code to be able to be coders without coding. But behind them, there's a lot of code that's required. So I think that's awesome that you kind of like used your coding skills in that way.
Yeah, Vlad, who's the CEO of Webflow, he always makes this great point that I think it's like 0.3% of the world's population knows how to code. And so, if only 0.3% of the population knew how to write, and we were all just reading what this tiny portion of the world was writing, we'd be reading all of their inherent biases. We would only be getting a small, tiny fraction of the possible content available to us as a human population. And so no-code tools are allowing, it's just expanding on who's able to create software. I mean, software is everywhere now. And if only 0.3% of the world is writing that software, like that's a problem. And no-code tools are starting to solve that problem and make it so, because at the end of the day, I look at no-code tools like you're still writing software. You're just not messing with the specific syntax and minute details of coding. Like as a developer myself, when I have the chance now, like I will use no code tools before I will go and write custom code. It's so much faster, and it's you get to the product quicker. You're able to deliver better. So
I love it. Yeah. And I think I was having a conversation with a good buddy of mine who's a software developer, and I think it was on Saturday, and basically I told him like, yeah, you should definitely check out Webflow, because it's not that, you know, like there's a lot of stuff you'll want to continue coding custom, you know, especially with open source and with GitHub. There's a lot of ways in which you can build products very quickly if you're a developer as well. But definitely in terms of those front-end experiences, like Webflow just facilitates so much of it. And then you can also go in there and download the code. So you could just like create a couple features, download the code, and use it for the projects that you're currently working on. But you can do the opposite too, which is to like build most of it on Webflow and then go into Webflow and custom code certain things that you want done in there. Love it. No, I think that's where we're moving towards, right? And that idea that basically such a small percentage of people know how to code, when every single company or project these days requires a certain level of building, whether that's a landing page, a website, an app, or whatever, an algorithm. That's where this thing really has the potential to break through. And I think it's just the biggest problem is always the same. When you introduce new things that are very novel, it's educating people around them and then educating people to use them as well. And I think that for a lot of different tools in the no-code space, you take those things individually and they're powerful, but you teach 3 or 4 of them together, and it will change your life. Like, so I think that's awesome. So where do you see the space going? Like, where are we going with this?
I think that, you know, the tools themselves are only going to get more powerful. You know, a lot of what I see happening in the no-code space, it really mirrors what's happened in the software space. So, you know, I've like I said, I've been working in software for 15 years. I've been around for a little while now, and I've seen like the shift from before, to run a website, you had to buy your own servers and set up your own hardware, and you know, and you needed a whole team you needed like database experts and front-end experts and back-end experts and all these different specializations. And then, you know, things started moving to the cloud, to like AWS, and all of a sudden you didn't have to go and buy your own hardware, and you let some other entity who specializes in that, you let them manage that and worry about that for you. And so, you know, I'm seeing that with the no-code tools now, where they're just abstracting these layers away even further. And now with you know, maybe even a smaller 1 or 2 person team, you can use these tools and spin up legitimate products and move so quickly. You know, one of the great examples for me is Ben Tossell of MakerPad. He was one of the early Jetboost customers, and so yeah, I've worked with him pretty closely, and I just see how MakerPad's fully built on no code, and I see how fast he's able to just ship new features and make changes, and it's just like it's mind blowing. And I think that's where we're headed, where more and more products are going to just be fully built on no code.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like, you talk about it on the building side, but also I think for literally just learning very basics, also just on the business side. And I'll give you an example, like dynamic pages, right? On Webflow, the ability for someone who's, let's say, a business development representative, right? Or someone responsible for partnerships. You can create a dynamic page where you basically say like, okay, here's like a partner page. And then every time you want to create a new one, you simply have to add 2, 3 things. So for example, that partner's logo, you change the partner's logo, this, that, the other. You have one backend experience where you just put in the logo, go, publish, and suddenly you have a page that you can show to your customer and be like, hey, here's a partner page, like done. Like, so here's our partnership. And actually, it's funny because like for me, I remember a moment not too long ago where we partnered with an entrepreneur community, and basically like we had done the whole partnership in a day. We had a conversation in the morning. Then 2 hours later, he had the partner page with everything set up. and then he just launched it within his community a couple hours later. And it's just like, that's the kind of thing that's also really important to understand, is that ability on the business side to empower business people. And that's where we're getting in this really cool space, right? A marketer can basically take this and build a first product and drive all his traffic towards that product and monetize it if he'd like. You have people in biz dev who can create easier partnerships. You have people, developers who can build out full solutions quicker, so that they, whether that's through no code, through low code, which means integrating some custom code as part of that no code stack. And it's so exciting.
Yeah. I previously worked at a startup where we had 3 developers, and one of the developers' basically full-time job was to build out internal tools for the marketing team, for the operations team, for the sales team, just for those people to be able to more efficiently do their jobs. And I think about that now today, and with some of these tools like internal.io or Retool that specifically is for teams like marketing teams to be able to build out the tools themselves that they need, so they're not sitting around waiting for developer resources to be available. Then developers can focus on, rather than having 1/3 of your team just building internal tools, now you've got your full team focused on building the product and improving it for customers. So I think that's another area that will be absolutely huge for no code.
Yeah. And you talk about these, these companies who basically have education budgets around sort of training their internal teams, right? Like a lot of these larger companies have that. Man, they should be leveraging those budgets to like learn no code like immediately. This is a way for them to directly benefit from the progress of their own team, right? It's like, why wouldn't you want to give your own team superpowers? It doesn't make any sense to have someone internally, for example, doing any type of repetitive tasks anymore. Now, of course, it takes a couple weeks, a couple months potentially to learn some of these things, but the amount of time and energy you're saving in the long term is just. And you know what? Interestingly enough, there's been a lot of adoption of these kind of things with COVID, because now that people have to scale back on costs, they're having to face this real issue, right? They're having to face, okay, how do I do more with less? And I think no code is a good sort of way to do that. But again, I'm biased. Don't listen to me.
No, I think that's a great point. Yeah. I mean, like to make a change to your website or your landing page, a marketer or a biz dev person should never have to go ask a developer to do that anymore. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So, there's that amazing ad actually that Webflow did, where it's like, like someone sees a mistake on the homepage, like a spelling mistake, and like the project manager like calls the designer, who calls the developer, and like there's like 5 people on the phone, and like 4 hours later, like they got a hold of the right person, and he's like, okay, just do this, and then that person does that, then the other person does the other thing, and then at the end it's like they've changed, like it's spent a whole day and they've changed like one spelling mistake on the homepage, and it really illustrates the problem that we're having with the way that a lot of stuff is built. So now, like, we're definitely hooting our own horns, and we know that this is the future. Let's talk about some of the downfalls. Like, what are some of the pitfalls of working with some of these tools? I mean, I could definitely step in here, but I think I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I think probably the main downfall that I see is you are limited to what the tool provides. So if you want to step out of that box, some of the tools are good about letting you extend them. I think Webflow's done a pretty good job with, if you get 90% of the way there with just Webflow, then they allow you to add custom code that can maybe get you to that last 10%. Some of the other tools I've used have maybe not been so good about being extendable. And so it's like, until they release a new feature or support the use case that you want to use it for, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. So what that means for end users is kind of like pick the tools right based on what you're trying to build. And that's super interesting. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, and again, like hopefully I'm not bringing too much development into this, but it kind of reminds me of, it's not that much different from if you pick a web framework or a web library that you're going to build your software on. at the end of the day, you're still kind of in their box. You're playing with the tools that they give you. And again, if you go outside of that, then you might have to start doing a lot of custom stuff on your own anyways. So I don't necessarily see the no-code tools being that much different from that either.
I love that. And I love that you're speaking from the point of view of a developer, because that's a big fight that the no-code community is fighting overall. This idea of that, and I think it's partly based on the name, but it's also partly because I think some people who maybe looked into, like this was another case, like I talked to a friend of mine who is also a front-end developer, and he works for a sort of a development agency. But when he checked out no-code even just 3 years ago, like it was nowhere near where it is now in terms of power. So I think part of it is because people checked out the tools kind of early on, and I think that they were immature. And I think that happens in every industry, right? You look at things like virtual reality, and everyone was like raving about everything you'd be able to do. And then the bottom line is like, not a lot of people have headsets. So it limits a lot, like the development of that. And the technology is not where the promise is yet. And I think with no code, we've reached a point at which the promise that has always been there is being fulfilled. And now we have, not only is it being fulfilled, but now we have lots of, or a step further from that, where we have companies who have raised $300 million, others that have processed over $1 billion in sales, some who have $250,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Like these are all things that are proving that this is not just some fun little game where you can build a landing page with. And I think that's where developers will start seeing the power of it. But I love the fact that you're coming from the perspective of a developer. Actually, I encourage you talking about that, because I think it's something that encourages more developers to just look into them. We're not it's like in the same way that you're looking into all these different programming languages. This is a visual programming language, and it's another part of the stack that you want to learn as you move forward, and probably more useful than some of the very niche ones that you're currently looking into, right? That have limited sort of functionality in terms of what they do. Now, I don't think custom coding is going anywhere, but I definitely think that as we move forward, abstraction is, as you said, going to continue to happen at a sort of, it's going to keep accelerating, basically, the speed at which we do that. And it's affecting everyone, right? It's also affecting the investment world, because prior to this, like you mentioned this in terms of the this happening in development, right? Open source happened. Wow, now people can share and you don't have to recode things. Then like the back end, basically like AWS. Oh wow, now it costs even less to build a company. And as we move towards needing less and less money to build solid companies, you also depend on external capital less. So I think that what's great about that is that venture capital will be able to focus on super cutting edge things, which basically have, it's really taking high risk, right? But for most businesses, you can build them at a low cost. You don't really need investors. You don't need to go ask your family for $100,000 and put yourself in that uncomfortable sort of Thanksgiving dinner situation. And yeah, I think that it's exciting to see that, because it's the revolution of the middle class. It's or the evolution potentially,
Yeah. And kind of, to follow on to that, you can also build something that serves a smaller market. If you can use all of these tools and it only costs you, maybe you do it by yourself and it only costs a few $100s a month to run, maybe you only need to find 50 or 100 people that really, really need what you're building, or really are looking for the community that you've built around your product. Like and a lot of these are communities that are being ignored by traditional VC or software development. There's so much more software that's needed that isn't being built, and now people are starting to be able to build these things.
I love that, and I love what it really means in terms of underserved communities, in terms of communities that don't have the same means as other communities. I think that this definitely has a way to level the playing field, which is going to be exciting to see how it's used. I just hope that in history we don't have a good track record in terms of building great technology and putting them to good use, right? It's like, you look at the Boston Dynamics robotics, sort of those what do they call them? Are they dogs? Are they but basically those robots walking around.
Yeah.
And the first thing that pops in your head isn't, oh my God, they're gonna build such a great thing. You're like, oh my God, they're gonna use these strapped guns to them and bring them to work.
Right.
And I think that it's the reality is that as a human race, we've not been able to implement technology in a way that's benefited our society. Now I won't get too much into that because it ties very closely into politics and to sort of big corporation. But I will say that there is this opportunity, right, that you're mentioning, which is to say, like, hey, what if you served 1,000 people amazingly? Like, you can make a full business, or you can benefit a community, like really benefit a community through services that they don't currently have access to with just a couple of chops. And that's where I think actually in certain countries where you will have cultural differences that don't allow certain platforms to enter those markets. Just build a small, amazing thing that's well adapted for your small community, and you can have a huge influence. And if you're looking to also build it into business, you can also make money that way. So I think that that's an exciting thing. And I think that this idea, like, we've been sold this fake idea, right? That everyone has to either sell their company for $1 billion to Facebook or die trying. And I think there's just this healthy middle ground that is now starting to come out, and no code is helping that. So I love that message that you're putting out there. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and it, to use these tools for good, to say, it's like that comes from the leadership of these companies. Like, they need to be pushing that. And Webflow is obviously the one that I follow the most closely, and I've seen from their executive team, it starts with Vlad, the CEO, and all the way on down through all of their employees. Like, they are really big on making Webflow accessible to everyone, on helping out underserved communities, on giving everyone a chance to be a part of this. And it's been amazing to kind of witness that leadership, and to also have it affect me and the Jetboost product, and wanting to be a part of that and help carry that torch. And I've had people tell me, Jetboost customers tell me, that they use Webflow specifically because of the executive team and their messaging. And so, I think for them, like, that's just, they've been doing an amazing job of that.
I think so too. They also were the first to kind of go out there and put together a really big conference. Shout out to Brittany, who sort of led that effort. But I think that, I think that's what we're talking about here. It's like, there's plenty of money to go around, but like, the mission of no code on a deeper level has implications that are far beyond anyone building the no code tools, anyone building with no code, we're talking about an actual shift and the ability to level playing fields in a world where we're frankly alienating people who are not tech savvy. And even very educated people can be incredibly, from different industries, are terrified of technology. They're just like, oh, how can I not have to deal with this thing? I'm not techie. And I think that's where having a short, it doesn't take that long to learn things with sort of no code. And I think that's where there's a powerful thing where people can get that sort of feeling of like, oh, wow, I can do this. And then, hopefully feed that feeling.
Yeah.
And this is going deep. So let's talk about more the entrepreneurship side of this now. Like, you've built this company out. Tell us about some of the sort of advice you would have for people trying to build out their projects, or who are maybe thinking that they absolutely, can't get started. I think we're pretty clear about the fact that they can, even without leaving their jobs. Like, what is some of the advice that you've stumbled upon? And what are some of maybe, even talk about some of the mistakes that you may have made?
Yeah. So for me, the number one piece of advice I can give is just to get started and just to take action and do things. So I spent probably a good, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years of reading about startups, reading books, listening to podcasts, and that's all great. And I learned a lot from that. But when I finally switched to start getting over the fear of trying and just going and doing it and being okay with failing, like that's when I really started to accelerate my learning. And it was good to have that foundation of lessons from other people that I'd read and whatnot, and been able to take that. But it wasn't until I experienced it myself where all of a sudden, like that's when things started really taking off for my own entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. And so, and I actually love the fact that like earlier on you mentioned like, yeah, before building Jetboost, I built a bunch of other little things, and some of them didn't really work out, and some of them did like worked out a little bit. And I think that that's like also something to encourage. It's like, hey, like it's like being like, I don't want to learn how to play the piano because I will never be able to be the best piano player in the world. And it's like no one's asking you to be the best at anything really. And that's what I try to encourage specifically in our students, which is like, hey, just focus on your own progress. And of course you can look at guys like Chris and be like, oh, he's just so good. But like Chris started one day and he just started taking it from there, step by step, every day, giving a little bit of time, maybe once a week, maybe at first just on weekends. And I think that that's the kind of mentality we want to encourage in people. Because as you mentioned, like that piece of advice is awesome because it's like people are the biggest opposition to their own dreams. It isn't anyone exterior. It's not competition. It's nothing else but yourself and your mind and this sort of construct that you've created between sort of your identity and the ability to succeed, where you feel uncomfortable with the idea that you could potentially do something that wouldn't attain maximum success. I think it's just basically a shift of mindset that people have to start adopting in this new world, because we're in a world where you're going to have to learn new things, full stop. Technology is basically moving at such a pace that a lot of people's jobs will change. And you have a choice. It's basically, am I going to lean into the learning process and be patient with myself? Or am I going to be like, you know what, like, this is not something for me. Like, I won't be able to do it. I can't do it. Like, and I think that we need to encourage people to believe in themselves. It's so funny because when it comes down to it, like a lot of what you're teaching people when it comes to building startups or even building on no code is to it's mindset stuff, super interesting.
Yeah. My favorite quote is, to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. It's like,
boom.
It just that's my whole mindset now, is like, I want to fail as fast as I can, and that's how I'm going to learn the most quickly. Like, nobody knows the handful of products that I launched and went nowhere before Jetboost. Like, people aren't going to know all of your failures, all of your mistakes. That's the whole reason they're failures, because they didn't catch on. But when you have that thing that catches on, like that's what people will know then. So you don't have to worry about your failures.
Absolutely. And like I want to say this out loud as well, because I think like the more that we encourage talking about our own failures, the more that like people are willing to talk about theirs. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with this sort of like podcast. That's the message I'm trying to send out. But yeah, like I've sold a company, but I've also terribly failed the company. I've had to approach investors and be like, hey, I lost your money. It's the terrible feeling. I had a horrible set of months after that, and it definitely brought me in an emotional place where I had lost a lot of confidence. And it's just like, there's another great quote, which is like, you just have to be right once. Like you could build 30 startups, and if you're right once, like you can go to the moon. And I think that even that idea of like going to the moon, like most people are just trying to be millionaires. They're not trying to make a $1 billion company. Like a lot, if you make $1 million in one exit, or if you are able to generate $200,000 a year for yourself that you can take out of the company, like that is a huge accomplishment. You don't have a boss. You can live the lifestyle you want. You can work when you want and not work when you don't want. Like, and those are kind of the thing, I think, the benefits that people are looking for when they feel stuck in corporate jobs and they're like, oh, I need to like start my own thing. It's like, well, you can, and you don't have to quit your job.
Right. Yep.
So I will always be in that mentality of trying to encourage people to move in that direction on a mental level. And then I think, the actions, absolute must, because we've been learning from textbooks in schools for too long, and it's time that we start learning actual skills. And that's where the real learning happens, right? It's like anyone who's ever used the internet has that experience of trying things and be like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Whether it's even like creating a group chat in Facebook, and so I think that's the thing that we have to encourage. We have to encourage people to be okay with not being good, with sucking. Sorry, my language. But the more we encourage that, the more people will be comfortable with progress.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying one other piece of advice I would give is, I think most entrepreneurs or people that are looking to get into business, we tend to start out with more, I would say, self-focused or self-centered reasons, where it's like, I want to build a company, or I want to be able to live a certain lifestyle, or travel while my company's making money, which I think can help you with the initial motivation. But I think to really sustain a business and to really become successful, you eventually have to kind of shift that mindset into focusing on serving others. So, once you have your first few customers, like, you need to be 100% focused on them, on serving them, on what their needs are, and how are you helping them? Because the more people you help, the bigger of a success you or your company is going to be. It's just, eventually you have to kind of shift out of that self-focus and into focusing on others.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And even if you're being selfish about it, that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
It's like, because the more you improve your product, the more people will stay with your product and keep paying for your product if it's a SaaS business, for example. And the more that you're actually going to profit from that if you're looking to be selfish about it. But understanding your customers is such an underrated thing. And I think that's something where I always say, like, no code is absolutely crazy and amazing, but building a product is only 30% of building a company, if even that.
Yeah.
So it's like, people have to understand that you also need to become a well-rounded entrepreneur who has a good understanding of a lot of different aspects. You don't have to be the best at everything. That's the whole point of being a CEO, is having a kind of feel for all these different areas: marketing, product, talking to customers, like all these different things. Even a basic understanding of sort of finances, or none of these things are very complicated. Like, if you've gone to, like, I don't know, if you've gone to high school and done math in high school, like, you have plenty of knowledge to know how to put together basically a profit and loss statement, which is basically the basics of sort of the company's finances. And I think that that's something that for a lot of time we've alienated people through education almost. It's like, oh, you don't know these cool terms like, LTV and CAC and all this stuff. Like, that's kind of like jargon from the tech scene. But I think that, like, these concepts are very easy to understand, and that's one of the influences that I want to have, is really like help people understand what other people say are complex. They're not. It's like, most of these business things are not complex on a surface level, but the way that people are talking about them is automatically jumping in the weeds. And that's even a problem that happens in the no-code space, where people are getting really nerdy about no-coding. And so people coming in are like, I'm never going to be able to do this. This is crazy. And kind of like boiling it down to, like, oh, these are the kind of concepts that these people are using. And then, like, oh, here's the first little micro step, and to keep people motivated along the way. So as an educator, that's something that I hold very, very close.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this earlier, which is, you're focused on helping teach people how to basically see progress as fast as possible, which is sometimes difficult if you're teaching coding. But with the tools that you're teaching, you could spend days or weeks on, like, here's the whole landscape of all these no-code tools, and here's these different theories, and instead it seems like you're more focused on, okay, how can we quickly get you from step 0 to step 1 to, start that feedback loop of seeing real progress. And
absolutely,
I think that's great,
because I think momentum is where things are, and we're in a generation of people where we need to get that positive reinforcement to feel good about ourselves. Maybe like the boomers were not necessarily like that, but they also had way better prospects in general. You could own a house, you could do some basic things pretty easily. So yeah, I mean, it's all about connecting. The biggest gap I see is between humans and technology. And no code is such a big step into like reaching out towards the end human. So now you just need to really focus on the education side with the human. and that's where we're going to really empower communities, empower the world eventually. So what are some of your ambitions in terms of where you see no code empowering you in life in general? You know, outside of Jetboost, like what are some of the influences that you want to be involved in? And I know you're already doing it with the building Jetboost, but I'd love to just like hear, you know, what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think for me,
bit of a loaded question. Sorry.
No worries. You know, this is a kind of a very personal answer, but what I've discovered through Jetboost is an incredible sense of joy at seeing people take this tool that I've built, and you know, don't get me wrong, it's a very small niche tool that you know, it's tiny in the grand scheme of the no code landscape, but even with that, seeing this tool and people being able to create products and sites and just create anything that they weren't able to create before that, and seeing the human ingenuity of people are doing things that I didn't even know were possible. Like when I release a new plugin, like, you know, I'll build some demo sites with it. I'll test it out. I'll try things. But then when you put these tools in the hands of other people, they're able to take their own unique experiences, their own unique history, and their own creativity and do things that I didn't even imagine were possible. And so for me, I think, you know, I've found that that's what really gives me joy is seeing how these things can be used by others. And so, you know, I certainly in the next however many years hope to continue to be able to be a part of that.
That's so cool. And I think you are already a part of that. So congratulations. And thank you so much for putting this tool out there. It's just one of those tools where it's just so intuitive. And I think that basically I'm excited about what you say, because the implications are that now people who are in creative industries can start using some of that creativity, whether it's an artist, a musician, a skateboarder, you know, can basically pick up these things and start building their own creations, whether that's for an art project, a business, or anything in between. And I think that you're just really creating these things that allow such a beautiful front-end experience that is Webflow, have these back-end capabilities that allow all these other you know, possibilities in terms of end products. And that's what's exciting. I think it's seeing just how people pick up things, learn them, and then implement them in these ways. You're like, oh wow, I didn't even know that this was a thing, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you?
Yeah, just pretty much jetboost.io. You feel free to email me. I'm just chris@jetboost.io, or reach out on Twitter, which I am C_Spags. So yeah, probably those are the best two places.
C_Spags. Awesome. Very cool. So go and follow him on Twitter. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to want to follow this guy. He's constantly, you know, putting out cool stuff and building, and these are the kind of people that we have to start looking towards when it comes to getting advice on things that we're building. Also, you know, like, you're probably always looking, Chris, for people to tell you sort of features that they're looking for within, you know, that they might not find within Webflow. So if anyone's already in the Webflow sphere, you know, shoot Chris a little message and tell him some of the functionalities that you've been dying to get, and then maybe he'll have some of those on his roadmap.
Yeah, love solving problems that people have. So
very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining again, and you have an awesome afternoon. Thank you for everything you're doing in the no-code space, and I appreciate your attendance today.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks.